Okay, great. Well, first, I want to thank everyone for attending our first presentation of many more to come. We're going to do this on a monthly basis, and each topic will be different. Everything from sea lions to whales to even salmon. We're going to have some really interesting, exciting speakers. The first one is actually going to be our executive director, Casey, who we can thank for everything we've been through so far, getting this hospital going. First, I want to say any questions you have, please put them in the chat. We'll try to answer those and as completely as we can at the end of the presentation. Also, for folks who do not know our address to get to our website, it's SR3.org. That's where you'll find information about volunteering, our newsletter, and places to donate to. So I don't want to take any more of the time from Casey, who has an exciting presentation today and some also exciting news that's happened this week. So go ahead, Casey, it's all yours.
Great, thank you, Ken. I'm gonna share my screen here. All right, can you guys see that in full screen mode? I can't see you anymore, so somebody's gonna have to tell me.
Yes, I can.
Yes, it looks great.
Great. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. It's always a pleasure to get to talk to you and update you on what's going on with SR3. But I did want to give you a little bit of info about myself. If you have not met me or heard me speak before, my name is Casey McLean, and I'm the Executive Director and Veterinary Nurse for SR3, Sea Life Response, Rehab, and Research. And I'm also one of the co-founders of the organization. So this is a really exciting time in our growth, and super grateful for all of you that have been following us along on this journey. I am originally from the East Coast, and I moved out here in 2010. And having worked in the marine mammal rehab world for a long time, I really just quickly recognized a gap in some resources in this region, and really wanted to see what we could do to increase our capacity to be able to help these animals when they were sick or injured. So that's really where this whole idea was born out of. And there's many of these throughout the country, so it's not a novel idea by any means, but certainly something that was needed in the region. And so that's kind of where this passion came from, to help these animals. We want to see a better future for them, and we've had a lot of people join us on this journey along the way, which I'm incredibly grateful for, including yourselves. So SR3's mission is to promote the health and welfare of marine wildlife in the Pacific Northwest. And that's kind of a big, broad mission. And really it boils down to rescuing and protecting marine animals. And the way that SR3 does that is through our 3 programs of response, rehabilitation, and research. I'm going to focus a lot on the rehabilitation aspect since we just opened our marine animal hospital, and we'll talk about that. I'm going to touch on the others as well. And we have a lot going on, and it's a pretty exciting endeavors that we're in. So I encourage you to take a look at our website. But we do this because marine animals are really sentinels of ocean health. They are telling us what's going on out there. So we need to be paying attention. And as we help them, we're actually helping ourselves by protecting human health. We do have a very small team though, so this isn't something that we do alone by any means, but I wanted to introduce you to our small team that is growing, actually just grew this week, so it's pretty exciting. But we'll start here in the top left corner. This is Doug Sandilands. He's our whale entanglement response specialist. So that's what he focuses on. Down below him here is Dr. Holly Fernbach. She focuses on whale and dolphin health research with a strong focus on southern resident killer whale health. So we'll talk a little bit about that. To her, I guess that's her left, your right. This is Rachel Bishop, our Development and Communications Officer. Going over one more, this is Dr. Greg Frankfurter, who joined our team this past May, and of course taking care of all the animals at the hospital and responses in the field that we participate in. Myself directly above him here, and in the lower right-hand corner is Patrick, who just joined our team this week as our community engagement coordinator. So he's someone that if you guys are interested in volunteering, you may be hearing from him and connecting with him. So we're really excited to bring him onto the team. And I always include a picture of volunteers because honestly, we could not do this without volunteers at all. They are the heartbeat of the organization and keep us going. So we really appreciate all of our volunteers. As I mentioned, we do not do this alone. There's not really one organization that's going to be able to do all of this work to protect the Salish Sea. So we really try our best to partner with anyone that's interested in partnering in any sort of way to protect these animals and this incredible environment that we have here. And so some of these are organizations that I'm sure you've heard of. Of course, they include federal and state agencies as well. There's many more that we collaborate with as well. But we all have the common goal of protecting our oceans, of course. And the Salish Sea is a unique area. And I think that if you look around at what's going on, you can start to hear the sound of alarm bells. These animals are telling us that something isn't right out there, or what isn't right and how we can help address that. So a few of the things that I'm sure you've heard about are things like sea star wasting disease. And of course, our southern resident killer whale population declines. We also have sea turtles that are stranding and have been increasing numbers over the past about 10 years or so. And so that's something to really pay attention to. A lot of people don't even know that we have sea turtles that do come up to the Pacific Northwest coastline. And we should not be having turtles on our beaches. And they're really life-threatening emergencies. So we need to be prepared to help them. We're seeing an increase in humpback whale populations. Yet we're seeing an increase in the numbers of strandings of young animals. So these are all things that we want to pay attention to and figure out really what's going on because it affects all of us. Of course, there's larger issues out there like global warming and ocean acidification that cause problems as well. This little cute fluffy guy here are sea otters. Our sea otter population is slowly increasing, but unfortunately they do face a lot of threats, of course. One major one that is a potential is oil spill. So being prepared for these sorts of things if these animals need help is pretty critical. And that's something that we work with state and federal agencies to do that. Really why everyone does this work is to figure out what's going on out there and how we can address the issues. And one of the ways that we do that is through stranding response. And SR3 is part of a really large network of partners all along the West Coast. And this is a map here that you can see some of the various organizations located in the Pacific Northwest. I apologize, it's a little bit small. But you can find this online as well. And it'll kind of mark out the different areas and who responds to what. You'll notice there's a lot of phone numbers on here, but there is one main hotline number that you can call if you should find an animal that you are concerned about. So I posted that there so you'll have it. And maybe Ken, if you could put that in the chat box as well so people can pull it from there. But this is a large group of scientists, researchers, other organizations, state and federal agencies, all working and partnering together to respond to these animals. And one of the main priorities is public education and safety. So if an animal's on the beach, of course, even if it isn't necessarily sick or injured, we want to try and make sure people understand to not approach it and what they should be doing. So it's a large part of what we do. I always tell people that dead animals are just as important as well. They have something to teach us about the health of our ocean. So please do report those animals too. And so whoever's covering your area would be the first responders to come out and check that out and see if an animal really does need help. There are quite a few things that marine mammals do when they're on the beach that looks awkward and may think that something's wrong with the animal, when in fact, maybe they're just doing a very natural behavior. So always check in with your local stranding network. If you are particularly technologically savvy, you can download the Dolphin and Whale 911 app. And that's kind of nice because you can take pictures through it, and it also marks your GPS location, which can be really helpful if you're just kind of on a big beach and you don't have a lot of landmarks to go by. The top 3 threats that we generally see, that the stranding network generally sees, emaciation, disease, and human interaction. This just kind of, a lot of things can fall under these categories, of course. Human interaction can be things like boat strikes, gunshots, dog attacks. It can even be things where people may have had the best of intention and picked an animal up, not realizing that that wasn't the best thing for that animal to do. So that happens as well. And of course, things like entanglements. There's also a lot of other possibilities that you might not be able to see from the outside, such as toxins, contaminants. Sure, they might be emaciated, but why are they emaciated? Was that due to a warm water blob that caused the fish to move into a different area? Is it due to overfishing? So there's a lot of very complex things that go into responding to stranded marine mammals and stuff that isn't evident to the naked eye. So that's really where rehabilitation can come in. to help understand what these threats are and keep track of that so we can best address them. Of course, the welfare of the individual is also considered, but we also have to consider the understanding we're gaining of the population as a whole so that we're able to protect many more of these animals when we understand what the problems are that they're having out there. If it's a specific disease, is there some sort of toxin that's leading to that, and how can we drive conservation policies to address that? We have seen an increase in strandings in the Pacific Northwest over a large time, say from the 90s. You can see by this graph. There's a lot of factors that come along with that. One is the growing human population in the Pacific Northwest. I think, many years ago, there were lots of beaches where people never were. So these animals could either rest or do their natural behaviors, and no one reported a thing because they were just doing what was natural in their habitat. So there's a lot more eyeballs out there for people to report what's going on. I think there's also a lot more concern over the past several decades, people understanding that marine mammals are apex predators and they are telling us about the health of the ecosystem. So we're paying a lot more attention for sure. We've also had increasing animal populations. So generally when the numbers of animals increase, you may see more that are having health problems or entanglements or other sorts of issues. A little bit more about why rehabilitation and response is so important. Again, they're apex predators, and this is one of the ways that we can monitor ocean health. I tell people a lot of times if a fish that isn't commercially important has a huge die-off, no one may even notice. But if you have a lot of marine mammals suddenly suffering from something, people tend to take a lot more notice for these charismatic animals. So it's a way to monitor pretty much the entire ecosystem health since they are at the top. Think of it like a doctor checkup for the entire Salish Sea. Of course, there's those human interactions that we talked about. So it's really important to respond when we are mitigating human behavior. Sometimes it is not intentional, other times it is. Things like this monk seal with a fishing spear through its head there. Education being a huge part of this, so people understand how we can live harmoniously here with these animals. And of course, then there's things like anthropogenic issues, which is, I call a big fancy word for oops. We are not setting out to spill oil, but it does happen. So how can we be prepared to help these animals when we make a mistake in their environment? Rehabilitation can actually even prevent extinction. The monk seal is a great example of that. The Marine Mammal Center built a hospital in Hawaii specifically for this species that is on the verge of extinction because there was no one else that was able to do that. They had been rehabilitating marine mammals for 40 some odd years. They had the experience and knowledge to be able to do that. So even though sometimes we're rehabilitating species that may have normal population numbers, it's keeping us prepared to help those species that are threatened or endangered, and of course, mitigate those human impacts. So it prepares us for crisis mode, essentially. So the way SR3 responds in the field, and it has in the past since about 2016, is through the use of our ambulance. You guys may have seen this, whether it be in the marina or maybe out on the road. We would use that kind of as our MASH unit, I guess is the best way to describe it. We're able to triage things in the field and of course, transport animals if we needed to. So the Stranding network members reach out to SR3 and ask for assistance if needed for health assessments or transport or potentially necropsy support. We also can respond by boat. And that's a really cute little harbor seal there that we responded to. But we may have to drive some of these animals all the way down to California before we had our facility here because there just wasn't anywhere for them to go. But we were fortunate that our ambulance did allow us to do that. And we partnered with the Marine Mammal Center in Sausalito, California to be able to give those animals a second chance. We also respond to entangled whales, which I'm going to talk a little bit about in a few more slides. So now what we can do is another gap that we are filling in the area is with our hospital. So we're able to provide long-term rehabilitation for some species that previously had no other options. Janus is a great example of that. He is a little we think he's a hybrid of northern fur seal that was picked up and had to be driven all the way to California just because we didn't have somewhere here in the area to be able to treat him. Excitingly, we will be able to do that at the facility now if we have other animals like him. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the rehabilitation process in the facility in just a minute. These are a few of the other species that we will be able to treat at the hospital. We can treat up to 10 different types of species. The most common patient we see, this little guy in the middle, harbor seal pups, particularly this time of year. We'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. But we're also capable of helping sea turtles and sea otters and possibly even a small porpoise or dolphin. We won't be bringing whales or anything really large into the hospital. Those animals are either treated in the field and often with cetaceans, dolphins and porpoise and whales. The outcome isn't always great when they are on the beach. So those are things that we would do out there for them to alleviate suffering or potentially help them get back into the water if possible. And for those of you that might not be familiar with all of these species, this in the top left corner here is a stellar sea lion. In the bottom left is a fur seal. We would be able to treat Guadalupe fur seals as well as northern fur seals. Sea turtles, several different species we could help care for. Sea otters, small dolphins and porpoise, a variety. Mostly harbor porpoises around here a lot. Elephant seals, we're seeing more and more of those guys this year. The Stranding Network responders have been kept very busy with elephant seal calls, and most of them have been just fine or needed maybe just to be moved to a different location. But it's been interesting to see the increase of this particular species around here lately, and California sea lions as well. So let's talk about pupping. So again, this is a very common patient we see, and this is happening right now in our area. So harbor seal pupping season has started along the outer coast, kind of starts in May. So here in another month or two, or even into June, we'll start to see pups within the sound and in the lower sound as well. So keep an eye out for these pups. It's really fun to see them, but at the same time, the most important thing we can do is give them space. Harbor seals are extremely skittish, the adults, and if people are around on the beach and that pup happens to be up there resting, the mom simply won't come back.
Ooh.
So I wanted to remind everyone that the best thing we can do for these adorable little creatures is to stay back as far as you can and keep your pets on a leash. I know that's not as much fun, but maybe even if you can just do it for this time of year to help these little guys out, it would be great. They don't have a lot of fear at this age, and they not a lot of defense mechanism either. And, you know, as friendly as your dog may be, if the harbor seal pup snaps at it, it may snap back. So for the safety of all, it's best to keep those guys on a leash. And these moms only have 4 to 6 weeks with this kiddo. So they are usually always together. So they spend a lot of time on the beach together. She'll take the pup for swims. There's all kinds of things. So they need that time. And the pup nurses quite often, and it's going to gain about 50% of its body weight, or sorry, it's going to double its body weight in a very short amount of time from those 4 to 6 weeks. So it's really critical they're together. And there have been studies to show that they're almost always together. But on occasion, you will find a pup on a beach just resting because they are not born with the same level of body fat and, of course, the same stamina as mom. So it may need to take a rest, and sometimes they don't pick the quietest beaches to do that on with lots of people. And it can be difficult for everybody to keep their distance, especially when they're so cute. But it is necessary because not all babies on a beach need help. So these are some steps you can take, of course, as I mentioned, to stay back. Please do call that hotline if you are concerned at all, or if there's just a lot of people around. Somebody may be able to respond and kind of put up a barrier to help people see the pup. Sometimes they're very well blended and they don't know they're there, and just to kind of keep their distance. Again, this is something that they do naturally, is rest on the beach, but with people around, she won't be able to come back. This really does apply to any marine mammals in distress on the beach that you might be concerned about, to give the hotline a call. So sometimes, as we talked about, they do need help. We are excited to say that we have 2 brand new patients at our hospital. On the left here, this is a little guy that was named Finn, and right is Rainier. Both of these boys were abandoned due to human interference. I know, very sad. We're glad we can be there to help them. I think they're a great educational opportunity to remind people that they need to keep their distance. We do our very best, and of course, often have success with these guys, but we are no substitute for mom or being in the wild. So it's just really important to give them the opportunity to be out there as they're supposed to be. The Stranding Network takes the decision to pick up an animal very seriously. So these were 2 animals that were brought in by the Stranding Network members. And there's a lot that goes into that decision process. They will monitor the animal for a while because we want to make sure we aren't kidnapping anyone. If mom will come back, that is always the best option. So they will wait to see what's going on out there. And sometimes just because you don't see mom in the water doesn't mean she isn't nearby or that she isn't coming at a time when there's fewer people on the beach. So we can't always assume that they are abandoned. We want to give them every chance to reunite if at all possible. We're pretty good, but we are no substitute for mom. So let's talk a little bit about the rehabilitation process when these animals do come in. I always joke with people that if you've had kids, you probably know what it is because it's feeding, and then there's cleaning, and then there's feeding, and then there's cleaning, and then you finally get to set them free. It's actually, of course, a little more complicated than that, but there is lots of feeding and cleaning as you would experience with most babies. And it's important to remember the rehabilitation process is time and resource intensive. There's nothing cheap about giving these animals a second chance. We are thankful that we are starting to get volunteers trained up, and that's something you can certainly sign up for to help us out with, because without them, we wouldn't be able to do this kind of work. Right now, these animals are being fed from 7 a.m. to 10 p.m. So as you can imagine, it takes a lot of folks. We are working on training a small core team of people that have had some previous experience, but we're going to expand that very soon. So please keep an eye out for emails. If you signed up to volunteer, we'll start getting more and more folks in there. We're being a little bit conscious of protocols with the small area that we have as far as COVID exposures and things like that. So we're still being cautious as we go forward. I do want to remind everyone that this is not glamorous work, but it is very rewarding when we're able to return the animal to the wild, or, they don't always make it, but they do have something to teach us. And so that's really a valuable opportunity as well. And of course, there are times where we just have to end suffering if we're unable to help them, but that always is a thing that we're thankful we're able to do so these animals aren't suffering out on the beach. This is our facility, a couple different views here, because I want to talk to you guys about the process of what they go through when they come in. Hopefully most of you saw our virtual tour, but if you did not, a little bit of information about the property. It's a 14,000 square foot property in the Des Moines Marina, just south of Seattle there, not in Iowa. Some people have asked. We have 2 outdoor pools, an 8x4 and a 12x4. You can see those here in this enclosure. And then we have this covered area where most of the young patients or small patients come into when they first arrive. And that kind of just protects them from the elements when they're kind of in a fragile medical state. We can control the temperature. There's just a lot more control we can do in there. They will graduate from this tent and go to the bigger pools as they improve and gain strength. And larger animals, such as say a large sea lion, will start off in one of these large enclosures, of course. So once they arrive to the hospital, they'll get an exam after they've been with us for a few hours to give them a little bit of rest and a break from what is usually a pretty stressful event. We'll then do a full exam. We'll kind of look over their overall health, check their vital signs, kind of like what you're used to getting done when you go first into the doctor, take some blood samples, other maybe biological samples, and look for any signs of illness or injury that may indicate why they weren't doing so well. Each animal will get a medical treatment plan. There might be some medications they need, and we might do additional diagnostics like x-rays or ultrasounds. You can see this in this image, this aerial image here from the other side. You can see our hospital building that's on the property as well. And you guys may notice the white backing of this fence here. We do have a visual barrier all the way around. Our goal is always to keep these animals as wild as possible. You limit the human interaction and everything. So that's just some really pretty artwork that the city of Des Moines worked with us on to go around our property. Once these little guys arrive, they are placed into individual housing units. You can see that here. This is a little fin on the left. You can see it's got a little grating in there. It's just kind of a small pool area. When they come in, they only weigh, well, sometimes they're even less than 10 pounds, but somewhere between 10 and 17-ish pounds usually. And they have often not been weaned from moms. So we'll start them out on a formula. It's really high fat because, again, they gain weight very quickly out in the wild. And you can see here, we actually do that through a tube. They're tube fed until they're weaned off onto a whole fish. And in the process, we go from a formula to a fish smoothie and then to fish school. So they'll learn how to eat whole fish. And right now, when they first come in, they're eating somewhere between 4 and 5 times a day. And again, that's through the tube feeding. And you can imagine that creates a lot of dishes and a lot of cleaning. So that's where our amazing volunteers come in to help us, and our interns and everything, because it's quite intensive. But what they're eating and how often and everything really does depend on the species. I'm just kind of referring to harbor seals right now as far as the fish smoothies and everything and how they're processing. But other animals such as sea otters or sea turtle, this could vary a lot depending on their needs. And again, we do train our volunteers. They go a lot of learning for different skills. So it's a great way if you're interested to increase your animal handling skills or learn more about ocean conservation. This is all a great way to do that. We do limit our physical contact. So, often people might have visions of, nursing a little harbor seal pup in their arms. This is all very limited contact, and we don't spend a lot of time over them because, again, we want to make sure that when we return them to the wild, they aren't bonded to humans or habituated to humans, so they don't go approaching humans out in the ocean. This is our fish kitchen where all of our food prep goes on. Oops, sorry. And we are mostly feeding herring for harbor seals once they are on whole fish. You can see Dennis here is prepping some formula. This is our picture of herring. If you don't know what it is, it's a small forage fish that is a huge part of their diet out in the wild anyway. And we do have to have restaurant grade food. So each fish is inspected for any tears or missing eyes or missing parts, anything that could have led to bacteria being there that might not be good to feed them those fish. And again, the formula that we make is a very high fat, so that they double their weight really quickly. Once they are ready for release, they're about 40 to 50 pounds. And again, they came in somewhere between maybe 6 to 20-ish or 17-ish pounds. So again, quite a lot of weight when they're with us. Once they are on whole fish, they move out to those big pools. And that's when we just start tossing the fish in. There'll be other harbor seals in those pools for them to interact with. And that gives them a chance to learn to compete for food, find their own food, and really build up those skills that they're going to need to survive out there. So before they can be released, we need to see proof that they can find the food in the pool, they can compete with the others, and they're doing just fine. Oh, this is our very large blender that we use to make those fish smoothies. I feel like this is an advertisement for Vitamix. It's pretty incredible what that machine can do. If anyone's looking to make fish smoothies, I suppose. This is our surgery and treatment suite. It's an area where we would do diagnostic procedures such as x-rays or ultrasounds, but we could even do surgical procedures, which can be pretty challenging with marine mammals. It does require some specialized knowledge and experience because they're quite different from terrestrial mammals. So it's a little bit unique. And that's one of the reasons we have a marine mammal veterinarian on staff, so we can take those and make sure they're successful when they're needed. We can perform blood work in hospital as well, and some basic lab diagnostics, such as looking at fecal samples or looking at blood samples under the microscope. Some of the procedures that we might do in here would be things like wound repairs, fish hook removals. We might remove an eye if it's damaged. We can release one of harbor seals. They do quite well, or maybe even a flipper amputation. This room also does have a very large window that you can't see in this picture. We did put that in specifically so that volunteers or maybe students from UW would have the opportunity to come and learn at this facility as well. We have very high standards of cleaning around, just like all marine mammal centers do. This is actually a picture in the top left of some ladies working at the Marine Mammal Center in California. But cleaning is extremely important in the hospital because the health of the patients is already compromised. So we have very strict sanitary procedures. We want to prevent the spread of disease, not only for the health of the animals, but also we have to be cautious of human health as well, because there are things that could be spread from animal to human and human to animal. So keeping everyone safe, of course, which I think we've all had a very rough lesson in this past year or so. Clean water is critical to their recovery. You'll see our life support system down here in the right-hand corner. We have glass media filtration, which is in these large media filters here. We also have UV and ozone, which is what keeps our water clean and sanitary. This little box you see down here, this is a heater. Each pool has their own heater and their own filtration system. So we're able to keep those separate in case we have a very sick animal in one pool and an animal who doesn't have that same illness in another. We don't have to worry about that spreading over. And the heaters are really good if we have an animal that's maybe very emaciated or an oiled animal. We really want to be prepared for an oil spill response, so that's important for them. And of course, sea turtles, they like warm water. So when they wash up here in the Pacific Northwest in our cold waters, they're cold stunned, and they do need to be placed in warm water before they're transported back south for release. We do make our own saltwater on site as well. A lot of people are curious about that, why we do that, why wouldn't we just pull it from the sound? We have a lot more control of what's in the saltwater when we make it ourselves. And there was just a lot of permitting issues and issues with reaching the water because we're right in the marina, so we would have to go outside the marina. So really that just allows us to make sure that we've got the cleanest water possible. So release back to the wild is the goal for every single one of our patients, of course. So once their treatment's complete, they're going to get a full exam. They're going to get some blood work so we can make sure that they are ready to go back home. Typically, harbor seal pups are with us for about 3 months, but of course, depending on the species and depending on what the issue is, that time can vary greatly. Typically, we release them away from populated areas, of course. We don't want them going and approaching people, or we want to give them every chance to get settled into back into their ocean home without disturbance. We might also do that from a boat if needed. And we do often go back to the area where they were found or as close as possible. So even once they're released in the wild, we can actually keep learning from these animals. And a couple of the ways that we do that is through tagging. You'll see this little orange tag here on this very robust harbor seals flipper, and those are called flipper tags. And while this is not a digital tracker of any kind, it's really for visual recognition. There's a number, each of them get a number. So if anyone sees this animal out in the wild, or if it should unfortunately wash up dead somewhere, we're able to identify that animal, and it gives us a bit more information about what's been going on. Those typically stay in for a very long time. And I know in lots of places, they've had resites of animals that have been rehabilitated that are out there doing really well and having pups of their own. So it is something that does work. These little, what I affectionately call party hat tags down here, these are little wooden tags that are glued onto their fur. So they don't stay on horribly long. They do just come off as the fur molts. But this is a short-term visual something we can recognize visually out in the field to see where that animal might be, but very short term. And then of course there's technology that we can do tracking of these animals. You can see the satellite tracker here on this harbor seal's back, and this one on this one's head, which I just think is pretty goofy looking, but this is a little one-eyed harbor seal that was released. So they were curious to see how well this animal did. This is at the Vancouver Marine Mammal Rescue Center. And so that allows us to kind of learn about their movement patterns, maybe where they're foraging. Oh, lots of red lines. And just the resighting of the animals. So it can really help inform conservation efforts and just give us a bit more closer look into what's going on out there. If a patient should pass away, I should have mentioned this earlier, at the hospital or even in the field, we do some response as well. We're always doing necropsies to better understand what happened with that patient and what threat they were facing that maybe we didn't know about. So One Health, again, is really one of the biggest reasons that we do rehabilitation. Again, they are apex predators. They're giving us information about what's going on with ocean health in general. And these threats out there are rapidly changing. So just because we're looking at it for a couple of years doesn't mean we can stop looking, because there might be new threats or there might be ever-changing threats. It's really difficult for scientists and researchers to even keep up with what's going on out there without continuing these studies, which is a lot of what the Stranding Network does. Many of these groups are doing wonderful studies to help better understand the ocean health. And sometimes we might not notice a problem, again, if it's kind of down the food chain or in a fish that's not commercially important that potentially these animals eat. It might be something we would never notice if we weren't watching the health of these marine mammals. One really cool study that the Stranding Network has been working on is the antibiotic resistance study. I find it very interesting because obviously these animals are not taking antibiotics. So where are they getting the antibiotics? And what implications does that have for human health? If they're getting it from the food they're eating and we are eating the same food, how could that affect us? There's things like land sources. Are we prophylactically or treating cattle and things like that, and it's running off into the water system? So understanding where it's coming from is really important. And it's a study we're going to partner with the University of Washington on to continue and hope that we can better understand this issue. And antibiotic resistance limits our ability to actually treat endangered and threatened species. So that's one of the reasons it's really important to understand this issue. The other thing that rehabilitation can help with is just protecting the public's health and safety. You know, if there is a sick or injured animal on the beach, that can become an issue for the public if they're approaching that animal or even just on the same beach. So really taking care of those problems so that no one is getting hurt. Of course, it's protecting the health of the animal, of course, from human interactions that may or may not be intentional, and inspiring ocean conservation. If we are not telling people and showing people the impact that we're having, excuse me, they may not really have a good understanding of how their everyday actions can truly impact these animals. Mentioned that we also do field response. So pinniped entanglement response, pinniped being seal and sea lion, is something that we do as well with our partners in the network. And this is a team effort for sure. These animals tend to be rather large sometimes, and it does require some sedation. So there's a whole medical protocol that goes with this, and it's usually not the easiest thing to do. Seals and sea lions will show up with things like fish hooks. You can see this coming out the bottom of the chin of this one here on the left. And there's also things like packing straps that might be wrapped around their neck. This is an animal back in 2016 that we partnered with the Vancouver Aquarium to free this animal here. Had a packing strap wrapped around its neck, probably for quite some time. So we're able to sedate that animal or remove that, keep that strap so we understand what that came from, and perhaps we can work with the industries to change those things so that they aren't as strong, or maybe they're biodegradable. And that's really how we make those changes that are affecting these animals out there. We also deal with gunshot cases. I mentioned we have an X-ray machine, so we're able to take that out into the field to do some of this work. And of course, all of this is turned over to NOAA law enforcement agencies that take over any sort of prosecution or anything, but researching these cases and really understanding what's happening and making sure that we're learning something from that animal as well. Taking some samples and looking at their overall health is really important too. Talking a little bit about our Southern resident health research. This is just another way that SR3 addresses those issues out there and what's going on to make sure we're providing the data we can to policy makers out there. And we do this with drone technology. Drones are about 200 feet above the animals. It's minimally invasive. They don't even know we're there. And we get these really high quality photographs that allow us to measure their body and understand who's gaining weight, who's losing weight, who's pregnant. Detecting early pregnancy is pretty important. A lot of these whales don't carry a baby to full term. So if we don't know they're pregnant early on, we may not count that as a loss to the population. And all of those numbers and data really do affect what rules and regulations are out there to protect them. And of course, we can do things like measure calf growth rate. So just like taking a baby to the doctor and seeing what kind of percentile they're in, we can check and make sure these animals are developing as they should be. We're really excited to say we're going to be increasing our health metrics this year. We have looked at body condition and the size and all these different measurements. We're going to advance that a bit to looking at skin conditions, potentially adding some new technology where maybe we could take a temperature. Of course, we're taking things like blow samples to see what's in their lungs. So there's all kinds of things we're doing with this new technology. And the whole goal is to monitor for any diseases that might be in the population and understand what the health of the population as a whole is. So we might be looking at individuals, but we're really seeking to understand that broader impact to the whole population. And we don't do this just with southern resident killer whales. We also do this with other species like humpbacks and gray whales, bottlenose dolphins in California. Dr. Fernbach, who is our marine mammal research director, is currently in Antarctica. I'm sorry, she's in Alaska working on different killer whales up there, because we'll use those examples or those different populations to compare to the populations here and see what the differences might be and why one might be thriving and one isn't. And we're actually doing this research on harbor seals as well, assessing their body condition to see how the population is doing as a whole. Just because there's a lot of animals somewhere doesn't mean that that population is healthy. So really looking at what's going on to better understand that. How am I doing on time? Okay. Last thing I wanted to talk to you guys about was our whale entanglement program. This is another way that we're addressing threats that marine mammals face. And entanglement has become the leading cause of death for whales and dolphins and porpoises worldwide. So that's really scary to think of, because this is something that could be preventable. 70% of whales become entangled at some point in their lives. That does not mean that 70% of whales are dying from this. We're able to look at SCAR studies along with other research groups like Cascadia Research Collective and better understand how often this is really happening. So sometimes these animals, of course, are able to free themselves, or entanglement response groups such as SR3 and others come along and remove those ropes. We can't respond to every single whale, so finding a long-term solution is really the goal of why we do these responses and kind of forensically looking at what's going on with these entanglements. We do work very closely with fishermen in the industry to search for solutions, because this isn't something that fishermen are out trying to do. It is mostly active fishing gear that does entangle whales. So it's not the gear floating along the bottom that you think of as ghost gear or derelict gear that they're getting entangled in. But again, it's not because anybody's doing anything illegal necessarily or fishing in the wrong area and things like that. It's just the amount of fishing that's going on and the number of whales that are in the same area that is leading to the problem. So we do work closely with them. This was just an image to show you that just because you see something very simple at the top of the water, what's happening below is quite complicated. So a lot of these videos you might see out there that make it look like, oh, you can just, cut the string off the back and it's good to go. A lot of times these responses are multi-organizational, multi-experience level, and they can take several hours often to help these animals. If you are a boater or spend a lot of time out on the water or anything like that, please do write that number down for the Entangled Whale Hotline. You can keep an eye out for them when you're out there. Please do report them right away. We're really good at finding whales in general, but finding a specific whale can become very difficult. So any efforts to stand by while we get a team assembled and ready and out there to help that animal is greatly appreciated. Of course, we always recommend not to do that yourself. You could endanger the animal and could potentially get a lot of that equipment wrapped in your boat props, endangering yourself as well. And always, I feel like everyone has, great camera equipment on them these days with their phones. So please do document, take any photos or videos that you potentially could from a safe distance so we can record all of that. Okay, I think that's my last slide. Went through this really quickly. It was a lot of information. I want to make sure to leave time for questions. So thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. Again, we could not do this work without supporters like you. So we love it if you're able to make a donation. We also have our gift shop on there if you're looking to purchase a shirt or an adoption kit or something of that nature. And we always love it when you follow us and on social media and share that with your networks, because we're still young and growing and people are still finding out about us. That's a great way to help as well. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you coming tonight.
All right, Casey, we do have a few questions, not many. I think you did a good job and answered all the questions ahead of time. But one, you mentioned a hybrid earlier, and I think that might have confused some. So can you elaborate what your hybrid comment, that it was not actually a hybrid animal, but it was, go ahead, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'm going to scroll back just so you can see. Actually, maybe he wasn't in that picture. We picked up a little fur seal that was, all right, hopefully this isn't making you guys dizzy, that came in, it was said to be a Guadalupe fur seal. And it looks a lot like this guy right here, this little Guadalupe fur seal. But there were also characteristics of a northern fur seal once we got him into care and were looking more closely at him, working with the Marine Mammal Center and others. People started to kind of question, well, is that really a Guadalupe fur seal or is it a northern fur seal? He had some mixed characteristics. I think his genetics are still pending. He has been rehabilitated and released, but I think we're still in question of exactly, was that a hybrid fur seal? So Guadalupe fur seals are typically down in the California off of Guadalupe Island. And then the northern fur seals are Alaska area. So, you know, where are these animals encountering each other? They certainly have ranges of areas they may travel that could cross over, but it was interesting to see that potentially we have a hybrid. So again, that's how we're learning things, by helping these animals, understanding them better.
Now, a question just came in, is their range very far apart?
Yes, we know we know their ranges overlap, but we know that their breeding areas are very far apart. So it's kind of curious that they mix somewhere out there that we don't know about.
And then here's another question, and I think this is relates to, where do we get things? Where do you get your food? The food for the seals, the fish.
Yeah, so this is a provider that also provides for the Seattle Aquarium. And this year the herring came from Alaska. Sometimes it may come from other areas, but that is currently a sustainable herring fishery right now.
Now, another person asked about volunteering.
Yeah.
Do you want to elaborate how they can volunteer? Or?
Yeah, so right now, if you go onto our website under the Get Involved tab, you can fill out the short little volunteer form. You'll get a welcome email. Do make sure that you actually get that. I know oftentimes it winds up in junk mail, so make sure you see it. Watch your junk mail for it. And then that way you'll get notifications as we start ramping up our volunteer program. We'll be doing orientations and trainings here in the next couple of months as our community engagement coordinator gets going.
And Casey, I'll throw in one. You mentioned the tags. I'm assuming if someone sees a tag, you'd want that reported back to us, correct? So you can track.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to depend on where that tag came from, but sure, you can call us and we'll make sure the information gets to the right researcher that has likely tagged that animal. It could have potentially been us that tagged it as well. So even calling that Stranding Network hotline number would be fine as well. I would just say make sure you get that information into one of the Stranding Network members so we can record it.
Okay, because I know in the past organizations want those tags identified so we can see if the animals are doing well, and it's another way for everyone to be a good volunteer. When you're out in the public, if you see an animal and it has a tag, just don't get that close to it, because there's certain regulations and safety for the animal. Stay back, but use a long binocular or camera and try to get a photograph of that tag would be great. Same thing when you see an animal in distress, call the people. So you can be great volunteers if you don't have the time to come and volunteer with us, but while you're walking that beach.
Yeah, and something else I should say about volunteering, I realize a lot of people ask this, is you don't have to have any prior experience. We love to train people. We will have a process that people can go through to increase their skills and really learn a lot of different things. There's also a lot of other tasks. If you say you're a great graphic designer, or you've got some wonderful financial skills or other things that you can assist with, administrative skills, there's always something to do around this facility and with our research. So please do feel free to reach out and explore those different opportunities.
I think that was the last question. Casey, great job. And again, folks, we're going to announce the next. Actually, did you want to announce the next presentation, Casey? You do have it for next month.
Yeah, so it's going to be June, which is Orca Month. And Dr. Holly Fernbach, our Marine Mammal Research Director, will be doing a presentation on the 16th, a virtual presentation. So please stay tuned. We'll be sending out some information about that so you can join us for that.
Yeah, everyone that signed up will get an email announcing those presentations. Again, we're going to do these monthly, real exciting ones to answer a lot of questions and misinformation that's out there. We're hoping to correct that. Like for one, sea lions do not only eat salmon, which folks think they do. Secondly, we're going to, surprise some folks. There are certain pinnipeds that can dive to 5,000 feet and hold their breath for up to 2 hours. But I'm going to save that for when that presentation is taking place.
Yeah, well, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate it. I'm happy. I think Ken and I will hang around for a few more minutes. If you have any final questions or you wanted to turn on your camera and just say hello, we welcome you to do that, but we won't take up any more of your time if you need to take off for the evening. So thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
And if you want to turn on your mic to answer the question directly, feel free.
Yeah.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
You too.
Yeah, thanks. It was very good. We appreciate
good.
it.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. Hopefully everybody learned a little something they didn't know before.
Always.
Yep.
Yes, that was a fantastic presentation. I learned a lot. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yes, wonderful. Thanks for all you do. I'm so pleased that you're here, and I am going to be a supporter, definitely.
Thanks, Blanche. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, I love wildlife, and we have a tremendous responsibility to protect our wildlife and the planet, because all life on the planet, and if they don't survive, we don't survive, right?
Agreed. Yeah.
Yeah, so
we're all connected.
Wonderful. Yes, we are indeed. Bless you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thanks, Casey.
Bye.
Hi, I'm tuning in from California, and I really appreciate. I'm really surprised that you didn't have a facility up there at all. So I'm actually quite happy that you've landed there and you're doing good. And our pupping season is quite different than yours. So
I know. Yeah.
So it's interesting. I'm like, wow, they're pupping season, and then I was trying to find some data on, does it just migrate up?
Yep, it starts down there with you guys and just kind of keeps on going up the coast and then down and around and into the sound. It's really quite interesting.
Wow, I guess I thought they just all did it at once at the same
right?
time, but okay, well, thank you. And I will be a supporter, and hopefully I'll be moving to that area in the near future and be able to volunteer.
Well, we would love that. There's been quite a few volunteers from the Bay Area that have had time at the Marine Mammal Center, or people from the Pacific Marine Mammal Center in Laguna who've moved up this way, and we're really excited to have their help as well.
Yeah, I'm all the way down in San Diego.
Yeah, okay, you're way down there. Well, let us know if you make it up here, and we would love to have you help join the team.
So thanks for all you do, and I will be a supporter too. And
you.
Also, the American Cetacean Society up there likes to team with other groups. So keep an eye out for us reaching out as well up there.
Okay. Yeah, I've partnered with them before and given some presentations. So yeah, they're a wonderful group. I really enjoy them. I'm looking forward to the time when they can do in-person meetings again.
All right. Well, maybe we'll have you as a speaker for one of our, I'll reach out to you separately to see if you want to be a speaker for San Diego, since we're doing Zoom sessions now.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Thank you for that opportunity.
Okay. And everybody's invited the second Wednesday of the month to tune in to the American Cetacean Society San Diego for different presentations.
Yeah, you can learn a lot about whales and dolphins.
And well, we do ocean health and pinnipeds.
Yes.
We're not solely that, but that's our focus.
Yeah.
Thanks so much for all you do. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a good night. Right, you guys, well, you're hanging in there, but if nobody has any more questions, I think we'll sign out for the night. But please do reach out. You have our website. Take a look at that. There's a contact form, or you can reach out by phone as well.
Have a good night.
Thanks, Josie. Have a good night.